We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to Allies in Action, Combating Antisemitism and Racism. I'm Sarah Albert, the director of Avodah's newest program branch, our Institute for Social Change. The Avodah Institute provides social justice professional development to the Jewish communal field. We run cohorts for Jewish communal leaders and training, coaching, and consulting for Jewish organizations. And we also create programs like this one and other resources that are available to the Jewish community at large. We're so glad to be partnering on this particular event with the Black Jewish Liberation Collective. Shechina Larks from BJLC is here to welcome you all as well.
Hi, my name is Shechina Larks, and at the Black Jewish Liberation Collective, we are a collective of Black Jews that's based in the United States, who amplify our voices and uplift our cultural, for the uplifting of our cultural and political organizing. We do this by creating space for community building and strategizing to support Black people who are working toward liberation and dismantling white supremacy, patriarchy, racialized capitalism, and anti-Semitic violence. We are an established national organization that facilitates the collaboration of Black Jews across the United States to build a Black Jewish political praxis and provide organizing resources and opportunities. Find us online at the Black Jewish Liberation Collective or blackjewishliberation.org. And you can follow us on Instagram and on Facebook at Black Jewish Liberation.
Dana, thank you so much. Everyone, you can find links in the chat to learn more about both of our organizations. And if you have any questions at any point during the program or want to participate in the Q&A later, you can write directly to the person labeled avo.chat, my colleague Allison, who has been an integral part of this event as well. At Avodah, one of our cross-program practices is to begin any gathering opportunity with a moment that we call Yesod. So I'll skip ahead to the next 2 slides from now, and then we'll come back to the agenda. Thank you. Yesod is a term with a lot of meanings, from grounding to foundation to creative generative energy. It's our way of slowing down and taking a moment to fully arrive in a shared space and get grounded together. We're coming into this program tonight from different locations, across different time zones, with different stresses from the day. We're also coming in with different concerns about this topic, different reasons it matters to us, different identities overlapping that we hold, different hopes for how things can be, but we're all here together. So for tonight's Yesod, I want to take this time to offer a few kavanot or intentions for our shared space. I know that some of you are driving or making dinner or taking care of any number of things. That's great. If you're able to, I invite you to take these next few moments to pause, to take some deep breaths, to close your eyes, and to let your body relax as we orient towards the work we're here to do together. First of all, we honor the spirit of machloket, respectful debate. Jews have a long history of disagreeing with each other and coming through those disagreements for the better. There will undoubtedly be ideas tonight that you don't agree with or that make you uncomfortable. That might be the case for me as well. That discomfort can be incredibly productive when we're willing to sit with it and work through it. We hope that you'll agree with us that the ideas you'll hear tonight are all l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven, aiming towards finding the truths that will ultimately help us all build the world we want. Holding that in mind, I'd like you to think about a person or community that helped you cultivate your ability to stay present in disagreement or discomfort, to keep listening, to keep learning. Take a moment to thank them in your mind for helping you get here. Next, I'd like you to think about someone you can't wait to talk to about what you'll be learning tonight. Hold them in your heart for a moment. They're also why you're here. My friends at the Institute for Democratic Education in America have a core principle that I love. Center yourself so that you don't center yourself. Tonight's conversation is about so much more than any one of us. If we're going to be able to stay present and stay listening, then we have to make sure we're continually able to return to our most grounded selves. Thank you for taking these few minutes to do that work together. Now, if we can go back one slide to the agenda, thank you for that. Okay. So in just a few minutes, we're actually remarkably running slightly ahead of schedule. We'll be handing things off to our phenomenal panelists and moderator this evening. Then at about 8:05 Eastern, we will go into our 3 breakout options. We will talk about those 3 options when we get there. We will have instructions for how to make sure you get into the one that you want to go to. We have some fabulous people leading those as well, and are really excited for the more interactive discussions that can take place there. And then we'll come back together to close at the end. So I am thrilled to now be handing off the Zoom spotlight to one of my favorite collaborators, a dear friend and a key presence in building the Avodah Institute, DEI consultant and expert and Jewish communal leader, Gamal Palmer.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be with you. And as Sarah said, I'm Gamal Palmer, and I have had the pleasure of working with Sarah and the Avodah team since the beginning of the Institute. In full transparency, I am in having my hotel Zoom room situation. So if my screen sort of goes side to side, that's because I'm dealing with lighting, et cetera. But more importantly, you all took time out to be here today to have this conversation with us. And it's a vital time in our country and around the world. And we need to be having more conversations about how we truly work in solidarity and how we address some of the most pressing needs in the Jewish community and beyond. And so I would love for the panelists to introduce themselves. These are esteemed people who think really deeply about the issues that we're going to be talking about this evening. And so I'd love for each panelist to introduce yourself. And one of the ways I'd like you to do that, or the way I would like you to do that, is to share with us, like, what brings you to this work? And tell us a little bit more about your work on this topic and why it matters to you. So again, I'm just going to say, what brings you to this work, and to tell us a little bit more about your work on this topic and why it matters to you. So whoever, actually, I'll just say, Shoshana, I'd love for you to go first, please.
All right. Hi, everyone. I am so honored to be here on this panel. Thank you, Gamal, and my other panelists who are friends and colleagues and comrades, and just a joy to be with. I am Shoshana Brown, and I live in New York City on Muncie Lenape unceded territory here. And I use they and she pronouns. And I come to this work, I come to this panel as one of the co-founders of the Black Jewish Liberation Collective, as well as the current U.S. Director of Training and Pedagogy for the Diaspora Alliance. And in that capacity, I'll just share what really brings me to this work is that for a long time, I had really focused a lot of my organizing and social justice work on prison abolition and racial justice issues. And what kept coming up was anti-Semitism kept becoming a wedge issue and kept getting in the way of realizing Black liberation and pushing forth certain civil rights and racial justice issues. And so, like, on one hand, being tired of facing racism, and on the other hand, being like totally unable to avoid the anti-Semitism that is sort of rife in our community, in our country right now. I come into this conversation because a lot of my organizing has led me here, and it's led me to build community with other Black Jews, specifically about this very conversation, and about how we are often what is at cost when anti-Semitism and racism collide. It is our Black bodies and Black lives that are often what it costs our communities.
Thank you so much, Shoshana, for the work that you do and that you will do in the future. Next, I'd love to hear from Salim to share with us your response to the same question as a way of introduction.
Great, thanks, Gamal. Hi, I'm Rabbi Salem Pierce. I am the Director of Spirituality at the Institute of Southern Jewish Life. I'm actually calling right now from Jackson, Mississippi, where the Institute is located. I, however, live in Durham, North Carolina, and I am originally from Houston, Texas. So part of what brings me here is my identity as a Southern Jew, a Jew living in the South, which I have done for many years. And in my previous position as executive director of Carolina Jews for Justice, we put together what we called an anti-Semitism listening project, which were listening circles that we conducted all around the state of North Carolina to try to understand how anti-Semitism affects Jews living specifically in North Carolina. But our interest was also larger in wanting to understand anti-Semitism in the South of the US, because it, as many of you know, it is a different cultural situation living in a place where the Christian hegemonic culture is very strong, very present, and in the South where you are much more likely to have closer relationships, I think, with non-Jews, and Jewish community is more likely to be more disparate. And so I really come at it from that perspective. And then also as a Jew living in the South, where the history of racism, while it's certainly not, it was not, in this country, not only in the South, heaven forbid, would not want to say that, but certainly the history of racism has played an extremely important role in these communities that I now serve at the ISJL. So that's why I'm here, and really want to thank the Avodah Institute for Social Change for bringing this important topic to everyone, and I'm honored to be here with my fellow panelists.
Thank you, Rabbi Salem. And yes, I'm currently in Atlanta, and in preparation for this panel, have been thinking about how, it's depending on where you are in the country, it can be easier to separate the two topics of racism and anti-Semitism. And in the South, in many places that I've been in these past few weeks, it's been really apparent to me how it is not as easy to compartmentalize as it can be in some other geographic locations. So thank you for bringing that up. For our next panelist, Nate Looney, please share about yourself in terms of your commitment to this work and what you're doing within this subject matter.
Thank you. Good afternoon, good evening. Really excited to be here with you all. I would say that Nate Looney, he, him, his pronouns, located in Los Angeles, also known as Tongva land. And I come to this work as a Jewish professional at Jewish Federations of North America. And my work is mostly based on bringing a Jewish diversity, equity, and inclusion lens to all aspects of Jewish life. And what that means specifically for this is related to my law enforcement background. I bring a DEI lens to our safety and security practices nationwide. And so one of the things that often comes up when we're talking about anti-Semitism is a strong urge to secure our communities. And when we do that, sometimes we forget that there are some folks that end up inadvertently being excluded from community in those moments. So for me, as someone that's a Black trans Jew, I recognize that in a lot of ways, a lot of the pieces of my identity are at the in the crosshairs of folks that wield anti-Semitic sentiment. So for me, it's about survival, and it's also about creating the world that we want to see in the future. I think that it's one of those things where I feel like I'm all in. It's like one of those questions where I don't wake up and think, oh, do I want to tackle anti-Semitism today? No, it just happens. And even here in Los Angeles, there's still constant reminders that anti-Semitism is alive and well. There is no luxury to put down my Blackness and pick up my Jewishness. Both exist all the time. So I have to recognize that in how I move through the world.
Yes, and now that we have language for having multiple identities, right? Whether you want to use the word intersectionality, or there are other terms that folks use or ways to talk about having multiple identities, I think it's even more incumbent on us as Jews and the Jewish community to think really critically about how we will be addressing both racism and anti-Semitism and how those two live together. So for our final panelist, Jonah, please introduce yourself and share with us about your commitment to this work and how you navigate the space through action.
Thank you, Gamal, and thank you again to Avodah and Black Liberation Collective for putting this on tonight, and excited to be with my co-panelists and everyone here learning together. So I'll tell you about two little slices of my life by way of answer. One is I grew up in the Lower East Side of New York City in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. And I grew up in an old immigrant community, a synagogue where we didn't have hot water or electricity all the time, where people were coming to daven, to pray there sometimes because they didn't have food to eat otherwise. And they had a really rich, beautiful, and sweet Jewish culture that is kind of my home culture. I speak Yiddish, I translate Yiddish. Going to synagogue is a really important part of my week. I love being Jewish and I love Jewishness. And so I really want to fight for that, because that's part of what we're fighting for, is for Jews to not, God forbid, get called a nasty name or beat up on the street, and also for us to get to be ourselves in all our many diverse religious, ethnic, racial expressions, etc., of being a Jew. The other slice of my life was I was a high school teacher in the Bay Area. And for the last 5 years, I taught at a Jewish day school, Jewish Community High School of the Bay, and Kehila High School as well, in the larger Bay Area. And that was the time that the Black Lives Matter movements were taking off. And my mom raised me, if there's a movement for justice in the streets, you got to go march with the people. That's what she was raised doing by her parents. That's what I did. And I started, having an awakening to, some of the everyday experiences of racism of particularly Black people in the country, but other people of color as well. And I started to look at my school and I realized there's Jews of color in my school. There's non-Jewish people of color working in the school. There are Mizrahi and Sephardi descended students and staff and faculty in the school. And they weren't getting treated in the right ways consistently by colleagues, peers, etc. So I worked in that area in that school. I co-founded with Roni Ben David the first diversity and equity program at a Jewish day school in the country, because that's just part of the work that's called to me in my Jewish communities and outside beyond for all people of color.
Thank you, Jonah. I too grew up with parents that said march. One time I was at university and I saw a protest and I just jumped into the protest and I was like chanting the same thing that everybody was chanting around me. And then I turned to somebody, I was like, wait, what are we protesting for? So I get you, but more.
I hope you got a good answer, you know?
I did. I was like, wait a minute, what am I doing? Do I believe in it? Should I be on the other side? What's going on here? So, but yes, luckily I was on the right side of justice in that moment. So Jonah, since I have you, I would love to really dive in quickly. So listen, a report was released by Tel Aviv University Center for Study for Contemporary European Jewry and the US-based Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, saying that anti-Semitism is on the rise. And 2021 was a new high for anti-Semitic incidents. Can you just speak more to why you think that this is the case and how this is connected to other types of oppression?
Yeah, thank you, Gamal. And this is a question that I get a lot, and that I should also say that I do DEI work for inclusion of Jewish communities and fighting anti-Semitism in college campuses and other kinds of settings. So in those kinds of settings, this question comes up like, what is happening, right? You know, why is it on the rise? And here's my best answer. And again, to echo what Sarah said earlier, I don't necessarily expect you to agree with me. Let's all think through this together. So, you know, try this on and see what you think. So first of all, a question. The day after the January 6th, 2021 insurrection in Washington, D.C., which is one of the gravest threats to our democratic institutions and electoral system, perhaps in American history, or certainly in a long time. The day after that, what was the first site targeted by pro-insurrectionists in New York State on January 7th, 2021? It was the Museum of Jewish Heritage in downtown Manhattan. And what were they doing there? They were dressed in Nazi fetishizing gear. They flew a Confederate flag, and they displayed Nazi emblems. What is in their minds? Why are they going to the Museum of Jewish Heritage the day afterwards? Right? So what's going on there with that intersection of anti-Semitism and anti-democratic stuff? They honestly believed that, first of all, the elections were rigged. That's probably obvious from the context. But second of all, that Jews were behind it. Right? They didn't have evidence. There was no sound evidence, and no sound evidence has come to light to this point that the elections were actually rigged. So this was all conspiracy theories, conspiratorial thinking. And these people and many people in that movement believed that Jews had rigged the system. Right? So that's why they targeted the Museum of Jewish Heritage. And they were there to protect also the memory of the Confederacy. That's part of what they were fighting for, as a white-dominated and explicitly white-dominated white supremacist country. So by way of example, I want to argue that modern anti-Semitism rests on two pillars. The first is conspiracy theories, right? Stories about Jews controlling global finance, the banks, Hollywood, media, electoral system, et cetera. So that's one. And the second is dehumanization. Okay, and dehumanization could be on a religious basis, saying, you know, you're going to hell because you're Jewish, or it could be on a what I would call a racial basis, right? A body basis, or there's something inherently bad, inferior, unathletic, unhealthy, ugly, too big-nosed, et cetera. Those are bodily based ideas of inferiority. So those could be on a racial basis as well, right? So we have conspiracy theories and dehumanization. They work hand in hand, because if you don't see someone as an everyday person that might be different than you, but an everyday person with joys and troubles just like you, you're more likely to believe something like, oh yeah, they're out to get you and they're secretly controlling everything. This first and foremost targets Jews, right? Jews get beat up in the streets, get called a slur, or get discouraged from expressing our cultural, religious, et cetera, identities. And it impacts all general society. How so? It says Jews are to blame for all of our problems. Guess what? Our society has real problems. But if anti-Semitism is telling people, go blame Jews for your real problems, that's disempowering our our potential, our efforts for collective change to really address the roots of those problems. Which brings us back to, thank you for bearing with me here. That brings us back to your original question, Gamal. Why is anti-Semitism on the rise? We are in a time of crisis. So we're in a time of skyrocketing inequality. We have the worst wealth and income inequality in this country as a whole since the robber baron era, so in 100 years. The racial wealth gap is bigger now than it was 50 years ago between Black and white Americans by median income and median wealth, right? So rising inequality, which means there's a lot more unfairness, there's a lot more suffering. That's fertile ground for people to say, oh, maybe Jews are behind it. We've had COVID, a lot of death and suffering from that. We have growing climate change and climate disaster. We have threats to democracy. We're in a time of profound crisis and inequality, and those are conditions under which people are more interested in a story of, oh yeah, maybe Jews are to blame, or yeah, my institutions aren't transparent and I don't have a real say in my own well-being and the well-being of my community. So how do things actually run? Maybe Jews are to blame, right? And we fight that by having strong, transparent institutions, a tolerant society, widely shared prosperity, and educating about anti-Semitism as we're doing tonight.
Thank you for that robust and sort of larger picture analysis. That's really helpful. And hopefully we'll have time to get into that deeper, because I'd love to actually, within that context, hear you talk about just sort of how anti-Semitism is impacting other oppressions, et cetera, as well. So really appreciate that. And so this is a question both for Shoshana and Nate. What do you both think about, or what has been the most successful in how we have been fighting anti-Semitism? And what do you think that we should be trying or keeping in mind that we haven't yet? So what do you think that has been most successful in how we have been fighting anti-Semitism? And what do you think we should be trying or keeping in mind that we haven't yet? Shoshana?
Yeah, I am really grateful to this question because I sat back and really thought about it. And I will say that from my own experience, as well as from the experience that most people that I talk to in my work, in my daily work of fighting anti-Semitism and its weaponization, the answer always comes down to building real relationships. Most of the people a lot of people who are driving anti-Semitic policies and a lot of the disparity that Jonah really spoke to earlier are people who don't actually know Jews or have deep relationship with Jews at all, don't live near or around Jews. And so it's really important for us, I think, in this conversation to remember that a good portion of our country does not live near a Jewish community. A good portion of the United States population does not know a singular Jew, just one. So it's really important to start with that backdrop, because I feel like I grew up in New York City, like Yoina, and so I'm like, being Jewish is just like it's everybody. And like everybody has a bagel for breakfast. It's normal. Like having a bagel is not a Jewish thing. It's just everybody does it. And so there's this way in which I think sometimes our being part of our Jewish communities can have us feel like this is our world and how could anybody not know us? But it's important, I think, first to take a step back and say, like, a lot of people do not have relationships with us, and the most successful strategies around combating anti-Semitism has been in relationship building. And I've seen that particularly in my racial justice organizing, with folks that were part of Black Lives Matter and the movement for Black Lives and other racial justice organizations, particularly in New York City, where I live and do a lot of political organizing. We didn't have strong relationships. And then a number of fellow organizers and Black Jewish organizers in New York City took it upon ourselves to say, like, let's actually do some intentional community building and invite non-Jewish Black folks into relationship with us. And also like be clear and proud and out ourselves as Jews in Black communities. Because as Nate said, like, we don't actually have the advantage to just put one identity down, but there are often ways that I personally was moving inside of Black communities that I just chose like not to like be like visibly Jewish, or not to have that be a central part of a conversation, for a lot of different reasons, mostly personal. And I would say that when we started bringing those folks into community, number one, they were so excited. Like, nobody was like, oh, we don't want to know about you or don't want to do that stuff or whatever. Like, they were like, tell us more, like, share with us more, like, invite us to your like rituals, invite us to Shabbos dinner. Like, we want to know what's up, right? And so there's like a deep sense of like solidarity when we open ourselves up. And that can be really scary given the times that we're in. So I've seen that work both with like Black Jewish Liberation Collective, where now those people, that must have been like 9 years ago, those people are still the first people to call me when anything goes down, like anything, Tree of Life, Colleyville, Texas, anything that goes down in the Jewish community that's anti-Semitic violence that reaches the news, like, I can guarantee you, there's this group of organizers and activists and leaders that I built community with who are the first ones to text me and check on me. Even before my mom or other members of the Jewish community check on me, they will call me. And that is just like, to me, so powerful and such a success around how we can build spaces where people look out for us. And there's something else that I want to add here, which is like, underlying this idea of the success being building relationships and being in solidarity, it's really important for me to name that there are real challenges to doing that. Not beyond the logistical challenges of like, Jews are a small population and we can't have relationships with everybody. I think that there are some more important challenges that I want to name around that, which is like trauma, fear, and isolation.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you. And that, that does happen a lot, that people don't really realize how much we are not in relation, how much people are not in relation with Jews who are non-Jews, and also what happens when we do build relation with non-Jews, because there is a deep level curiosity times. A lot of times people want to talk to me about Black anti-Semitism. Like, anti-Semitism is anti-Semitism. There's not Black anti-Semitism, Asian anti-Semitism, South African anti-Semitism, right? Like, it's anti-Semitism. And many people that I know in the Black community are often who are not identified as Jewish, are much more curious about Jewish community and culture than anything else. But Nate, please, we would love to hear your response to this question.
Sure. There's only a few things that I can add to that, because the number one thing in my book is building relationship as well. I think that is the most important thing, because you can spend all day on Google reading, but until you're actually in a relationship with people and understanding how things move throughout the day, how things land for folks, you really can't understand what's going on. And I think that this has probably been one of the things that I've seen as being the most successful across America, is where you have folks that are building deep intentional relationships. And so by building relationship, I don't mean going to an event and meeting somebody one time and then, friend, and then never seeing them again. The leaders or the folks that I've seen that have really been successful with this have built long-term, long-standing relationships, similar to what Shoshana was speaking about, where this is something that's beyond a year, beyond 5 years. We're talking 10, 15 years, long-term relationship. The other thing that I think is paramount is education. So part of combating anti-Semitism is educating ourselves on some of the false narratives that come up around anti-Semitism, or some of the stereotypes, things that some folks may not realize are actual stereotypes or harmful, is another area for real engagement. It's one of those things where if you're in relationship with someone, and you do something that's harmful to them, regardless of what their identity is, there's going to be a level of trust to actually engage on whatever that is, whatever that subject may be, and a way to move forward. And that's really what's important, because people are going to make mistakes and maybe get things wrong, but understanding that there's a mutual understanding for movement forward. So I think that's probably the main big bucket of things that I would say is what's leading towards success, and also recognizing that it's not an oppression Olympics, that we are all fighting the same type of hate, and creating that communal awareness that that's what we're fighting against makes us all stronger.
Thank you. Really well said, Nate. Thank you. And so moving, this is, for Jonah and for Rabbi Salem, what do anti-Semitism and racism have to do with each other, right? Like, what's at stake for white Jews in fighting racism? Jonah, would you like to go first?
I don't know, Rabbi Salem was pretty insistently pointing at me, so I.
Oh, I didn't see that. Sorry.
Happy to. So on one foot, as they say, just one example of really horrible racism and anti-Semitism is the so-called Great Replacement theory. And that's a white supremacist or white nationalist. Those are people who want a white dominated or a white Christian only populated country. Many of them subscribe to this idea that our country is getting increasingly racially and religiously diverse, and Jews are to blame for that. That there's some Jewish puppets who are controlling immigration, et cetera. It's all part of a Jewish plan to undermine white Christian, heterosexual, et cetera. These are all part of their Planck's society. And we've seen this in the violence, the Squirrel Hill Synagogue shooting, which was referenced. The shooter was angry about increasing Latinx and Muslim immigration to the country. And he thought that Jews controlled the immigration policy, and he targeted a synagogue that had been doing refugee aid, right? And we also see that in the recent horrible, or more recent horrible, supermarket shooting in Buffalo that was in a predominantly Black neighborhood, targeting Black people. This was also a shooter subscribed to the so-called Great Replacement theory. He thought there's too many Black people in the country, like it's a genocidal theory and towards Black people. So there's ways that we both get targeted by this, but we get painted in different boxes, right? Jews getting painted as like the puppet controlling, undermining society behind the scenes, and then religious and racial minorities, specifically Muslims and people of color, being seen as like the people you have to control and get rid of. So that's really horrible. And I'll just briefly say a few things that are at stake for me as a white Jew in fighting racism. One is my soul. I say this, not everyone talks that way, but I am a observant religious person. And what does it do to my soul walking through the streets of New York and seeing, like, having a roof over my head and food to eat and seeing so many people who don't, and living in a society that does that to anyone, but does it so disproportionately to people of color. So that's one thing.
Thank you.
I can yield to Rabbi Sam.
Yes, please. I'm sure you have many other things, and hopefully we'll have time to get to it. Thank you. And I think as Jews, speaking to our soul is vital. So thank you for presencing that. Rabbi, please.
Yeah, Yoina stole my answer. As the rabbi, I was going to bring up the spiritual stakes as one part of this, and what it means for white Jews to be fighting racism. Simply put, like white supremacy is a force that degrades everything and everyone, and in different ways, but certainly and with different forces and all of that. But certainly when white Jews benefit from, take advantage of, or complicit in white supremacist forces, like that distances us from the divine. And I'll just say that, that we push God away when we don't act. And then the second thing I'll say is that the forces of anti-Semitism and racism are part of the same machinery that is working to keep certain folks in power and keep other folks controlled or blamed or scapegoated, etc. So it is in all of our interest, and certainly for white Jews to be fighting racism, because it is the same folks who are benefiting from racism are also benefiting from anti-Semitism. It's all connected, and so there is the spiritual stakes, but there's also the very much my liberation is connected to the liberation of all people.
Thank you. Yes, whatever we may believe God to be, hopefully our Judaism brings us closer to it, them, her. And so thank you for really speaking to that, Rabbi. I want to talk a little bit about solidarity. And there are many definitions to what solidarity means. People have a lot of context for solidarity. And so in preparation, I'm sort of cobbled together a few different versions of the word. And so, solidarity, truly believing that your liberation is intrinsically connected and dependent upon the liberation of others. It's not sympathy, unity, and coming together around a common goal and purpose with action attached, right? So truly believing that your liberation is intrinsically connected and dependent upon the liberation of others, and that you do that through action. When you think about what happened during the most recent racial uprising here and organizing in America over the past few years, and a lot of organizations made statements and claims, but yet many organizations, as we're finding, did not follow up with action, right? So they actually wanted to be in solidarity, but did not arrive. So this is a question for Shoshana and Rabbi Salem. What does solidarity-oriented strategy towards fighting anti-Semitism and racism look like? And what are the challenges getting us there? Shoshana?
Yeah, I think that like one of the major points, just to drive home I think thread that we've all been weaving here around building relationships and relationships with other people, with our neighbors in community, and also our relationship with Hashem is like really understanding how to put that into action and being in conversation with those folks as we develop our strategy, ensuring that whatever our idea of combating anti-racism is never in conflict with another community or does not cause another community harm, right? So I'm a social worker. One of my ethics is do no harm, beneficence, right? Like no matter what, do no harm. And I think that is one strategy that I think is really about being in solidarity. And the other thing is showing up, that we as a Jewish community cannot wait for other people to show up for us to show up, right? Like justice is not a quid pro quo. It is not something that we are selling or bartering. Our justice and showing up for us and fighting anti-Semitism means showing up for protests against Asian hate, showing up for protests against raising the rents in New York City, showing up for communities that are struggling, because we can recognize that their struggle is also our struggle. And so when we do that and we demonstrate that we know that for a fact, and we place our trust in Hashem, that like we show up for them because we know that in the future they will show up for us, not that we have to show up for them so that they show up for us. Not that we show up for them to pay, to put money in the bank so we can extract that later. But in true understanding that our fights are actually the same, that is like what we have to continuously do. And we have to continuously look at what are the actions that we're taking. And the hardest part about that is who's to benefit and who's being harmed by this action. And the hardest part is to recognize in so many ways that as a Jewish community, there are many ways in which the Jewish community in this current moment does have privilege, right? We've been talking a lot about the way in which there are deep issues of oppression, but looking at those issues of privilege, we have to look at who's not at the table. The Black Jews, Asian Jews, Jews with disability, all kinds of Jews, and really expanding our notion of who is included in the Jewish community. And the other piece of the challenge in getting to that place is fighting our trauma and fighting the fear. Anti-Semitism is about isolating Jews and isolating us so we feel like we're the only ones. And so when we do that to ourselves, we are internalizing that anti-Semitism that really gets in the way of finding safety. So it's that insular trauma response. Yeah, that insular trauma response that we need to work and heal from. And I want to hear also like, what Rabbi Salem is going to say, because I know she's going to blow it out of the park.
Rabbi, I guess the floor is yours.
Yeah, I want to say, I'll speak to this as part of my experience being in the South, which is, just the most wonderful place. Not monolithic, but there's just so many great things. And one of the things that is so great about being a Jew in the South is there's just not that many of us, and I would say not that many progressives. This is an overall very conservative place. What that means is we have to figure it out with each other. The people that, the folks that are in power, I don't think they're the majority, and I don't think that they represent, the greatest wisdom. But we are, but like the forces of progressivism and are smaller and have less power in the South. So we have to figure it out together. And I'll just say that one thing I see, and I've seen over and over and over again in my communities, is and I'm not gonna focus so much on this, but I do want to name it, that Israel-Palestine issues can be a huge wedge in working and in solidarity, solidarity-based strategies for fighting anti-Semitism and racism. And I'll just be a little bit more explicit about what I mean by that, which is to say, if I see white Jews often show up at places, and there might be mention of Palestinian liberation, which is a cause that we all Jews should support. But we have been trained to hear that as an anti-Semitic threat, a Palestinian talking about their experience. So what I will say is, my beloved Jewish community, I will ask you, I see this all the time getting in the way. White Jews then opt out and say, there's no space here for me because someone is talking, a Palestinian is talking about their experience. And I want to say to my beloved Jewish community, a Palestinian talking about their experience is not inherently anti-Semitic. And this is where relationship, as Shoshana and Nate especially have talked about, this is where relationship and leaning in and figuring it out together is going to get us to where we want to be. And I will end on that note.
Thank you. Thank you for naming that. So I want to do a very rapid round of this next question, this final question before we get to just the few questions that our audience members have posed for us. So the question is, where are we seeing multiracial solidarity-driven approaches to fighting anti-Semitism? And what are the behaviors that we want to mirror and build on? Basically, what is possible if we move towards that vision, right? So 3 different questions. You can choose one of them or answer quickly all of them. And I'll repeat them one more time. Where are we seeing multiracial solidarity-driven approaches to fighting anti-Semitism? Or what are the behaviors that we want to mirror and build on? And or what is possible if we move towards that vision? So just like literally, folks, a sentence or two for this very large question. And for our first person, Nate, please.
A sentence. Okay, on one foot. I would point to the top shooting in Buffalo. After that shooting, the way that the members of the Jewish community showed up for the non-Jewish Black community was true and authentic. And that wouldn't have been able to happen if they hadn't already been building relationships 10 years earlier, so that they were already in solidarity with each other when that moment happened. I believe that is what's needed moving forward in an intentional way throughout our North American community.
Great, thank you. Jonah?
Little piece of history, 1937, there were anti-Nazi marches across the West Coast. I just learned about this. Jewish leftists, Japanese leftists, African-American leftists, Mexican-American leftists all marched together in a march against rising Nazism. How can we learn from that model for today?
Great, thank you. Shoshana, did you want to, or Rabbi, would you like to take a stab at this very briefly, or do you want me to move on to the next questions?
I just want to say one thing. I think I just want to bring in this important piece on healing internalized trauma, the internalized anti-Semitism, internalized white superiority if you're a white Jew, etc. I think there's real deep trauma, and we cannot actually only talk about this anti-Semitism through a lens of policy and social justice action without talking about the healing work that needs to be done in our community. Communal trauma and individual trauma.
Thank you. Rabbi?
good. I'm really happy to hear some questions from our audience if we're ready.
Great. Okay, wonderful. So we just have 2 questions, so we'll have time for maybe one person on the panel each to respond, and if there's time left over, then we'll see what we have to work with. So how do Jews work together across differences of opinion about what constitutes as anti-Semitism? Rabbi, why don't you take this one? Do you want me to repeat it? And you're muted.
Yes, and I'm not sure I'm the right person, but
Okay.
yeah, if someone
So
else
how
wants
do
to jump in.
Jews work together across differences of opinion about what constitutes as anti-Semitism?
All right, I mean, I can take that. I think I'm wondering if there's a little bit of the Israel-Palestine question in there. Yeah, I will say, and I think Shoshana so brilliantly just spoke about this. I mean, I think one of the reasons that the folks at Carolina Jews for Justice launched this anti-Semitism listing project is because we know that Jews are under listened to about anti-Semitism. And there are lots of reasons for that. But I think part of our work as a community is to heal, as Shoshana just so brilliantly said, communal and individual trauma. And I think that has to happen while we grapple with these issues, because we are right now as a community in a very much fear and trauma-based response to anti-Semitism. And so things that are microaggressions or that, like are things that are not actually life-threatening, our community often interprets as life-threatening because of our trauma response. And I have so much compassion for our community, of course, and we need to own that trauma and work on it, be compassionate with ourselves, be compassionate with our communities as we navigate that. But that is a huge part of this, is confronting and seeing, okay, what is the trauma response here? And then what is actually anti-Semitic? What is, a microaggression? What is actually life-threatening? And so we see that a lot when Israel-Palestine comes up, because people, I think, immediately jump to an attack on Israel is an existential threat to Jews. And I'm saying that's what lots of people think. That is actually not the case. Always. I really want us to have the compassion for ourselves and for each other. And, the luxury of being able to address our trauma. This is going to take a long time. This work is for us to do. And we have to love each other well to be able to do that.
Yes.
Can I add in here, Gamal?
Mm-hmm.
I just want to add briefly that I think I'm in dialogue with lots of people who do intercommunal work, so work like bringing synagogues and churches together, etc. And the thing that I hear most often from them is that this battle of definitions is actually not helpful. And for lay people and people who are on the ground who are just worried about anti-Semitism, like the actual definition is irrelevant. Like how we're defining it feels almost irrelevant to what the impact is. And so I just encourage folks to, I think it's a very Jewish thing that we do, which is argue about definitions, and encourage folks to use our critical thinking to just say, who is to benefit from when we use a particular definition or not? Who is harmed when we use a particular definition or not? And to what end are we actually arguing for? Great,
thank you. Thank you. And we have one last question and only 30 seconds to answer it. So here it is. Everything that you panelists have shared with us so far is just incredibly useful, and I want to thank you for that. So what is one specific example of how to build the kind of mutually supportive relationships we're talking about here. And some of us have spoken to it, but so if there was one other example that has not yet been said, what's one example of how to build the kind of mutually supportive relationships we're talking about, relationships in solidarity? Who would like to answer this question? Who has a quick example for us?
I have two examples, and I can make them into one short thing. It's spend time with each other. You know, if you share a tasty meal with someone, you can't necessarily sit at that table and be in a foul mood the whole time eating really good food. And you know, conversation will flow. And so there are organic ways to build strong relationships. And the last thing that I will just add to that, because I know it's only at 30 seconds, is that I look at this like soil. And if you water plants over here and the plants next to them and you're expecting them not to also get water, it's not going to happen. The water is flowing all through the soil. And so if we recognize that what we are doing to better our community is also going to impact those around us, it should inspire us to do more.
Perfect way to close us out. Thank you so much, all of you, for the work that you do, for the thoughtfulness that you bring, for the relationships that you are building, and for the vision for our community and our country and really world that you have. I feel better knowing that you are out there, and I look forward to continuing to be in relationship with all of you, and have a wonderful rest of your summer. And thank you everyone who joined us. I hope that you were able to gain something from this conversation as well. And now.
Hi. Now, back to me. First of all, just an enormous thank you. Thank you, Gamal, Shoshana, Nate, Salem, Jonah. So much incredible wisdom and Torah was just shared there. I know we're going into our breakout, so the program is not over. Just we have about to tell you how we'll go into our next section, but just as we thank everyone for what was just shared, and I just want to name. I know there were questions in the chat that we were not able to get to. We just we aren't going to be able to touch on everything. The breakout rooms will be a great place to keep digging in to some of the specifics that people were looking for. I hope you heard some of the specific projects and initiatives and examples that all of our panelists were sharing from their own experience and work. And the last question there with Nate and Gamal transitioned us beautifully into where we'll keep focusing in on sort of how do we do this. So there are 3 breakout rooms that we are offering to help people dive a little deeper. The first one is talking about anti-Semitism with teens. You'll be joining teen educators Becky Berger and Amelia Diamond for some ideas on how we can talk to teens about anti-Semitism and get a chance to ask some of the questions that you have that are coming up for you as an educator, parent, or youth professional. You can come with me and Shoshana to talk about how we have these conversations cross-generationally. We will be learning some tips and tools for how to engage in that. What are some of the differences that come up cross-generationally, and get a chance to practice some of that. Or you can go with Jonah and with Daniel Rajendra to explore talking to potential allies about anti-Semitism. And they will be focusing on frameworks, tools, and practical scenarios for interrupting anti-Semitism. So if you are not familiar with choosing your own breakout room, here is how you do it. In just a moment, you will see at the bottom of your Zoom screen a little icon pop up that says breakout rooms. You see the arrow pointing to it right here. When you click on that, you will get this popping up. And you'll be able to see room 1, room 2, room 3. They will each be labeled with the titles of the 3 breakouts that we just shared. Click join, and that will take you into the room that you want to go to. If your Zoom is not like a version that supports this, just stay in the main room, and my colleague Allison and some of our other colleagues will make sure that you get to the right place. You can either tell people in the chat where you need to go, or just we'll make sure we get you all into the rooms that you want to go to. So I think that is everything we need right now. So please join us in our breakouts. Thank you again to our panelists, and we're excited for the next stage.
Hi, I think everybody is now coming back from breakout rooms. I'm going to wait a minute. Wonderful. Welcome back, everyone. I hope that was an inspiring conversation. I just came out of the intergenerational conversation and it really blew me away. I hope and imagine that all the conversations that you were in were equally powerful. And for sure, I was thinking about there's so many questions I still want to hold and play with. I really want to thank you all for being here tonight. I'm Cheryl Cook. I'm the CEO of Avodah. And if you're like me, it was really hard to pick a breakout room because there was so much to talk about, so much fascinating conversations. And I really appreciate that you're all here and coming with a spirit of learning and of growth. So in the conversation tonight, we broke open some important conversations. There's so much more possibility. Thank you for speaking today. All the people who spoke, we started with incredible panelists. We now just had breakout room facilitators. I want to give a special shout out and thank you to Shoshana Brown and the team at the Black Jewish Liberation Collective, who've been our planning partners. Let me pass it over to you, Shoshana, to say a few words from Black Jewish Liberation Collective.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Yes, we at the Black Jewish Liberation Collective, we're really looking forward to this conversation. We have many members in the space here with us tonight who joined us, and hopefully a few new members. The Black Jewish Liberation Collective is a space where Black Jews from across the United States organize around fighting anti-Semitism and racialized capitalism and patriarchy and what that means for how we live in the world. It's really about liberation for all of us. And we do that through events and through organizing and strategizing together, through leadership development, and actually just supporting each other. So you can find more information at blackjewishliberation.org. You can donate to us there. You can also follow us on the internet, on Facebook and Instagram at Black Jewish Liberation. Thank you so much for having us, and we really enjoyed this collaboration with Avodah.
Thanks, Shoshana. And you have the best background possible. I'm a little jealous. To close out, here's a few next steps that I want to ask from everyone who've joined us tonight. Hold on. So first, I hope you'll take learning from tonight and start a few conversations with friends, with your Jewish organizations that you're part of, or with leaders in your community. I know there were a lot of moments where we were asked to think about someone we wanted to have a conversation with. I hope and urge you to have that. Second, we're going to be sending out an email this week with a recording of this presentation. We also will give you the option to sign up for our Institute newsletter, The Gathering. I encourage you to sign up if you haven't already. It really is a wealth of incredible resources in your inbox each month. We have subscribers who are educators who use the resources in the classroom and who are part of boards and committees who use the content for continued learning. It's really a new resource that Avodah has built out over the last year. Third, I hope you'll support Avodah and our partners at the Black Jewish Liberation Collective. We're sharing their website right now and social media links in the chat, and you can also donate on their website. We're really grateful for the important work that they do, and this was really such a pleasure to do this together. And last, our Avodah Institute for Social Change is here to help you expand and deepen the justice work of our Jewish communal organizations. If you want to partner, support, hire us, or be involved in any way, please email us. It's institute@avodah.net. We're going to put that up in a link. We'd love to hear from you and be in conversation. So thank you again for joining us tonight and really for being here for the full 2 hours. I'm so grateful.